2 years, no, probably more than that now. I just started doing my magazine, Dodge and Logic. I think we've got issue 1 out. And, or issue 2 might have even been out. And I was approached by the Manchester International Festival. I'd been approached the previous year by them, and they said, do you want to work with Gorillaz on, who I believe are a popular music ensemble. Not the actual Primates. I mean, that'd just be stupid. But sort of, so they said, do you want to work with Gorillaz on something for the Manchester International Festival? And I said, look, no, I'm sorry, I've got too much work on. I really haven't got the time to do it. Persistently, they phoned back a year later, and I said, look, I've got even more work now than sort of, you know, than I had before. So I really can't do this. But they were saying, well, look, you know, it could be, we were thinking, like, you could do an opera, like, all about superheroes. And I said, yeah, but I definitely don't want to do that. You might have noticed that I've just spent the last 2 or 3 years reviling superheroes. And they said, oh, well, all right, it could be about anything you want. It could be about magic. And I am a bit of a sucker, I suppose, for the old magic. And also, I like showing off and showing everybody how brilliant, knowledgeable I am. So I could not resist saying, well, if you want to do an opera that's about magic, then you should probably do it about alchemy, because actually opera grew out of alchemy. Monteverdi was an alchemist. You know, I know these things, and I really enjoy sort of rubbing people who don't know them's noses in it, I suppose. And they said, oh, that's fascinating. And so, thus encouraged, I went on and was saying, and if you're going to do something about alchemy and you're like the Manchester International Festival, then you're probably looking at something like an opera about John Dee, who practically designed modern Manchester when he was in exile. Well, effectively in exile. Queen Elizabeth had grown tired of him, and after he returned from Europe, she'd sent him up to Manchester to just do a boring job, which he did his best at, laying out the city centre, improving conditions there. That was where all of his family contracted plague, except for his daughter Kettering. His entire family was wiped out, and he returned with Kettering to Mortlake in London, where, attended only by his daughter and his spirits, he spent his last days, which William Shakespeare then turned into The Tempest, with Prospero and his daughter and his spirits on their isolated island. So they said, oh, that sounds fantastic. Perhaps we could just like meet with you and see if you've got any ideas that you could share with us. And I was starting to think, hang on, I've just started publishing an underground magazine, haven't I? Actually, getting Gorillaz to maybe in a bit of a reciprocal deal, you know, if they'll do, say, a cover and a couple of pages for Dodge and Logic, then maybe, you know, that would help the magazine, and it might be quite interesting doing an opera about John Dee. So I arranged to meet with them. We talked. I said, would you like to do something for this Dodge and Logic magazine? I said, the next issue, the deadline for it, I think end of February or something like that. And they said, yeah, that's fine, that's great. And I said, well, in that case, you know, I can do your opera. And they said, well, can you do us a little bit to show us what it will be like? And I've never written an opera before. I barely know what the word means. But I wrote my idea of an opera, and I'm pretty pleased with what I wrote. It was intelligent, and it was true to the spirit of John Dee. Don't know how well it would have worked as an opera. I mean, I've got a friend of mine, Tim Perkins, who's trying to do something with it along those lines at the moment. When I was asked about this at a thing down in Norwich recently, and I tactfully said, well, I was approached by this band to do this John Dee piece, but there were technical problems. Technically, they were dicks. I mean, look, essentially, it got closer and closer to the deadline, and I was saying, well, I'm sure they're going to come through because I've already written a third of the opera for them. I've actually made myself a little bit exhausted and ill because I've got a lot of other stuff going on at the time. You know, I was doing a thing down in Aldborough with Ian Sinclair that took a lot of preparation, and then I was coming back and trying to get on with this opera. I've got about a third of the opera written, and then the people at Dodge and Logic said, oh, there's apparently a problem with Gorillaz. Apparently they won't be able to make the deadline for this issue. Which I'd been assured by them that was going to be all right when I'd spoken to them 2 or 3 weeks before. But no, apparently they've got too many other commitments, so they won't be able to do it. At which point, I phoned up the people at the Manchester International Festival and said, yeah, look, actually thinking about it, I've got too many other commitments as well. So they said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, well, perhaps you could go back to your original idea, which, as I remember, was an opera about superheroes. And there was a bit of a silence at the other end. And I said, and this was perhaps a bit mischievous, I said, I don't own the concept of John Dee. I don't own the concept of opera. Perhaps you could do your own John Dee opera. And they said, oh, yeah. I said, just as long as you don't use anything of mine or any of my ideas. And another thing that had dissuaded me was when I'd gone down there to meet them, there'd been some talk about how great this John Dee opera was going to be because, like, oh, next year it's the Olympics. And, you know, like, I think they'd already had Monkey as part of the closing ceremony in Beijing. So, oh, you know, an opera based upon an important British figure, you know, we can close the London Olympics. Now, when I heard the word Olympics, of course, my blood ran cold because I've got friends in Hackney, you know. You might remember Hackney, actually. It was part of East London back in the day, well, about 2 or 3 years ago. But, you know, I know Ian Sinclair, I know Josie Long, I know Stuart Lee, I know people who live there. And Hackney, like most places that have hosted the Olympics traditionally in the past, has been more or less destroyed. I mean, forget the fact that the entire of the Olympic Stadium was built up on Hackney Marshes where the groundwater is contaminated with radioactive thorium. There used to be a watch dial factory that put the luminous numbers on. Radioactive thorium, they were just dumping it. And there were also experimenters from the University of London who were actually building miniature nuclear reactors on Hackney Marsh, and they're thorium powered, so the thorium straight into the water table. But I did not want any part of the Olympics. I didn't want my name anywhere on that. So that was another incentive to suddenly to pull out. I'm really pleased with the work though, you know, and looking back, I am really glad that I was not involved in what I understand Damon or Barney eventually did. I'm glad that I wasn't any part of that. So that's pretty much the full story, you know. But there might be at some point in the future, it might be an opera again using the sort of you know. Using my musician friend Tim Perkins, and sort of, so I don't know. Tim hasn't sort of, I keep forgetting with the microphone and just waving my hands around. Tim hasn't done very much with it yet, but he's still planning to do it. So at some point in the future that might happen. It was a question